With a few minutes left on the clock, I know this is a big one, and it's very important to the book. This is one of the main arcs that you guys assert throughout this work. In only the second verse of the entire Bible we read, quote, "And the earth was without form and void," unquote. Scholars for thousands of years have acknowledged that although this is not a bad translation, it is an incomplete translation. What do you mean by this?
Absolutely. It's extremely incomplete. So without form and void comes from the Hebrew rhyming words tohu vabohu. Let's look at those words first. Isolate them as words and see in Hebrew to the original Jewish readers, what did those words mean? First of all, from James Strong, the celebrated Strong's Concordance, everybody knows that routine, right? Even he says that tohu means to lie waste, a desolation of surface. Automatically and right away, something happened to the surface of this place. Bohu, to be empty of acuity and nothingness, an undistinguishable ruin. That's what these words mean. According to James Strong, let's look at another one. Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon says tohu means that which is wasted, laid waste, and bohu means emptiness or voidness. Sound like something God created? Okay, moving on. The Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew English Lexicon says tohu is a formlessness, a confusion. Remember that God is not the author of confusion, the New Testament says. Unreality, emptiness, formlessness of primeval earth, and listen to this part, a land reduced to a primeval chaos. That is what this word means. All right, Dictionary of Biblical Language with semantic domains, all right? Tohu, formless, wasteland. What is barren and void of use as tracts of unpopulated land? Ruination, destruction. What has been destroyed and in chaos and confusion? One after another after another. Look, that's just focusing on what people say the word means. Let's move from lexicons for a moment over to commentaries and take what they think that means in the whole context of the whole verse here. Bible Knowledge Commentary here says, such conditions as tohu vabohu would not result from God's creative work. Rather, in the Bible, they are symptomatic of sin and are coordinate with judgment. The Schofield Reference Bible cross-references Jeremiah 4:23 through 26 and Isaiah 24:1 and 48:18, which he says, with all of these taken together, it clearly indicates that the earth had undergone a cataclysmic change as the result of a divine judgment. The face of the earth bears everywhere the marks of such a catastrophe. Like, he's just looking at this like, duh, right? All right, Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, one of my absolute favorites. And then we'll move on to another thing. Their critical commentary says, this globe at some undescribed period, having been convulsed and broken up, was a dark and watery waste for ages, perhaps, until out of this chaotic state, the present fabric of the world was made by God to arise. There is nothing about tohu vabohu, without form and void, that can theologically be seen as God's design. Now, before we move on very quickly, of equal importance to all of this, the Hebrew word haya, which is recognized here in English as was, the earth was, without form and void, over and over and over again throughout the Old Testament, it means became. Watch this. Genesis 19:26, just as one example. But Lot's wife looked back from behind him and she became, haya, a pillar of salt. Brown Driver Briggs says it means fall out, come to pass, become, happen, occur, take place, come about. And it came to pass that. I could go, I brought 25 others, but with only a minute left on the clock, the point is that verse does not say, and it was without form and void. It said it became. Something happened to it that rendered it that way.
Well, that really stands in support. And again, you only briefly mentioned what people will find out when they read the new book before Genesis. The dozens and dozens of references in the Bible translating the word as became. So you would read Genesis 1 and 2 in the beginning. When was the beginning? We don't know. It could have been a bazillion years ago. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, verse 2, and it became dark and void and chaos, which goes back to much of Derek Gilbert's research into the chaos dragon, the theology of that. It became that. It was a result of something that had catastrophically affected the original creation of the earth. So there is a great deal of support there to back up what people kind of commonly refer to as the gap theory. Verse 1, then there's a gap of time, and something happened. Now verse 2, we start the recreation, and that is approximately 6,500 to 10,000 years ago. God makes Adam and Eve and so forth, and recreates, restores. We'll get into that again in one of these other programs, the verses that say he literally restored the surface of the earth. Well, what happened to make him have to restore it, right? So we'll talk about those things.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear from the other references in Jeremiah 4, verse 23, you mentioned Isaiah 45, verse 18, that the references there to becoming formless and void are in connection with judgment. So it suggests that Genesis 1, verse 2 is also connected to some judgment. As the commentaries you cited, Donna, something happened before God created Adam and Eve and Eden that forced God to bring some judgment onto the earth, which rendered it formless and void.
So some of these verses that they have referred to, let me just read them so that the audience knows exactly what was said. Isaiah 45:18, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it. He created it not in vain, which is Donna's reference to tohu. So Isaiah is contradicting the theory that it was dark and void and that was the way God made it. He said, no, he did not make it tohu. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord and there is none else.
Wow.
George Hawkins Pember, he quotes that same thing in his famous book, Earth's Earliest Sages, and he says, obviously the authors have mistranslated this word. It should be, it became dark and void. Also, scholars point to Psalms 104:30, says, God renewed the face of the earth. So the surface or the face of the earth was restored after something happened to it. So clearly something happened that made the earth that way, and God had to put it back together. As a pastor, I was formally trained in the Assemblies of God, typical theology, evangelical, mainstream thought. You know, the earth is approximately 6,500 years old. But as a pastor, I slowly over time, I started questioning if that was really true. I hated the fact that you have so many people that are secular that they look at the age of the earth and the dinosaurs were millions of years ago, and you dumb Christians, I couldn't become a Christian. I can't take my brain out of my skull in order to become a Christian and deny what is right before us, the soil erosion and all the things of the geological strata of the earth, and also extrasolar planets that have asteroid impacts that we've detected that go back maybe millions of years. They see all of that and they're like, but okay, you got Adam and Eve giving the grandkids dinosaur rides 6,000 years ago, and they just think we're dumb. You know, I don't live my life to try to make them happy, but it did cause me to start questioning, okay, but is this really real, or would there be a way of maybe harmonizing? And I am so excited about this book because, Donna, that's what was accomplished in this book before Genesis. It actually appreciates the position of the young earthers. It agrees that Adam and Eve were created approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, that all of that is a fact. But then what it says is, but before that, something else was going on the earth. Why was the Nakash? Why was the fallen Luciferian angel, Satan, why was he in the garden when Adam and Eve were created? He was already there.
Yeah.
When before that time did he arrive? Yeah, I love that so much. So this partly what we were doing. When Donna and I first started talking about producing this book, I had a lot of reasons why I wanted to do it, and I did want to entertain the difference between young and old Earth and all these out-of-place artifacts that are around the world and interesting stuff like Göbekli Tepe and all that. But at the end of the day, we thought, what would really be the main motivation here? And one, that's not the only one, but one of the main motivations was, go back a few weeks ago when I said, it bugged me when I was a pastor that you would have non-believers who felt like, well, I can't be a Christian because you guys are science deniers. You guys are the early forerunners of the Biden administration. So, and they just would not become a Christian. And I always looked at it and said, we're not denying any kind of real science, because if real science says that the earth is very old, I don't buy the line that God made it to look old in order to deceive us. That's heresy.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But there was 6,000 years ago a recreation in Adam and Eve. So we agree, actually. We actually take what the young earthers believe, what the old earthers believe, and what science, real science believes, and we put it together in one volume. And now, if you're watching this program, you don't even know how you got here or why you are here, and you've always just said, well, those Christians, they're nuts. They deny science. Now you don't have an excuse anymore. Now you welcome in, Pilgrim.
That's right.